like little boys
Yeah.
or hangers.
Yeah.
And to me, it is the aesthetic shifts because one is this denial of and huge fear of death. And so we are beginning to look like Egyptians in the fact that in order to deny the fact that we're aging and that we're mortal and that we must pass through death, we deny it by shaving all our hair off. But this in turn
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
tantalizes us and
Yeah.
sexualizes the child at the same time.
Yeah.
And Mac, to go back to the analogy I made to The Exorcist, what you're seeing in that juvenilization of the vampire myth is you just got a glimpse at the enemy's hand. The
Yeah. I think
target
that's
the
right.
target is innocence. The target is the
Yeah.
child. The target is the female because the female is the source of corporeal life.
Hmm.
And so the tool that gets used is the male, but really the target of all of it is the female. I put this in sort of college level blunt terms in my classes sometimes when I talk to my college age students about hookup culture.
Yeah.
And I say, look, I understand hookup culture, but I've never honestly met one person that was ever happy in it. They're
Hmm.
they're miserable, and I imagine it must be the same thing with you guys in recovery. When
Mhm.
you're talking about, did you ever meet anybody that was just happy-go-lucky, so happy that they were addicted to porn?
Yeah. Right. Right.
They're not.
Right.
There's something deeply, deeply saddening about it, and I don't think any individual can ever escape that. But the way I jokingly put it in my classes is, I'm like, look, you know, even if you want to pretend that two consenting adults can do with each other whatever they want, at the end of the day, what you're really doing is you're walking up to somebody and saying, "Hey, do you want to go back to my place and rub stuff?"
Right. Right.
Because all you're doing is using another person for your own gratification and allowing them to do the same thing to you.
Right.
And that saddens me just to think about it. Um,
Right.
and
So it's tautological at its sort of
yeah,
contraceptive core, right?
which which really means that it's not sex at all. It's just
Right.
the sin of onan.
Right.
It's turning the sexual desire masquerading as a desire for something else, for someone else. But it's really narcissistic, and it's really turning in on you become your own vampire.
Right. And and it's what it all it does, is all it does is enervate, right?
Hmm.
It shreds you of any sense of potency, any sense of masculine power, right? I mean, and so you look, even I'm remembering parts of the novel. I mean, I haven't read the novel in 25 years, but Bram Stoker I'm talking about. But there are these huge portions where the marks are listless, and they're like, just they can't do anything, and they're depleted, right? Now again, blood there is being used as a metaphor, but that's fine. I mean, I think we can run with that, because that is precisely, who stands to benefit by having legions of young men enervated.
Yeah, just wasting themselves.
Right. And it's, well, bad folks, right?
Yes, yes.
Clearly people who want to turn a buck. I mean, they're just digital pimps, right? But there's something underneath that. There's something behind that, that is, manifest. As Greg here, I think, correctly invokes The Exorcist. That it's, there is something behind it, right? It because if you think of having, again, I'm using like a legion of men, right? A legion, a Roman legion of potent men. What if you could get them to unman themselves, right?
Right.
En masse. Well, that,
Right.
that that's pretty useful. That's pretty useful.
Well, and
And
haven't we? I mean, social media
yeah, yeah,
is filled with what you'll notice there's some pushback on social media now,
hmm,
Right.
and a reassertion of the manly man,
hmm,
that I play on X all the time, because
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
I'm the
absolutely.
I'm the last person in the world that you would look at necessarily and think, well, he's a manly man. Um,
we
but
we we poetry teachers,
yes, yeah, but the point is, there's a real craving for it out there
hmm,
among men and women alike, and it's a very, very healthy craving.
hmm,
I'm not surprised to see it. Um, and You
It's a crave. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
go ahead, Matt.
I was gonna say, I think it's like a craving of purpose. Like I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
people are craving purpose. And
right.
when I think about the vampire myth, the characters that typically fall under that spell, maybe they don't have that strong enough purpose or connection to where they
Well,
see this shiny object, this
yeah,
handsome figure. I mean, I can look back on life on like past relationships where I felt like it was more kind of brought in through like the physical,
yeah,
versus just, being more mature, having a more open mind about what you're getting yourself into, versus seeing that shiny, flashy object, that lure in front of you and say, I think I'm going to go for that. Versus
Yeah,
if you have that purpose and you have that higher, I mean, obviously, I think we've talked about already, but like having faith, being connected with Christ, to me, I mean, that saved my life, when I was at my deepest, darkest moments, like above all else. Like that's actually the first part of, there is Alcoholics Anonymous, but there's also Porn Addicts Anonymous. My brother actually went through it. And of course, the first part, the first tenet of it is to have a higher power,
right.
well,
yeah, go ahead.
well, that's that I think that's at the root of it. The denial in secular humanism of a higher power. Paris is festooned at either end of the Champs Elysees, as George Weigel brilliantly used in his book The Cube and the Cathedral. Right, we have
Right.
Notre Dame at one end, which was the foundation for Western civilization, and then at the other end we have the Cube, which is a monument to atheism. And these are the twin poles of the modern age. And at the same time, Mac, what I would say, now this is my experience. Kale met me when I was young and sorry, but thankfully he met me when I was married.
Yeah.
But he can attest, my experience with all of that when I was a younger person was that the whole hookup culture thing, all of that, it literally scared me. And I feel like God was watching out for me. I went on a stint when I was an undergraduate, and I wrote for a television series out in LA. And I was only planning to stay there for the summer. And then at the end of the summer, they said, "Look, we're like the work that you do so much. We want you to stay." And frankly, LA scared the hell out of me. And I said, no, I'm going to go back. I hadn't been to Rome yet, Kale. You know what I mean? So that was my thing. I was like, I'm not missing Rome, and I'm afraid that if I stay out here, this is I tell people jokingly now. I was like, I had a moment where I had a vision of myself getting spit out of the ass end of the gay porn industry 2.5 years down the line, just because of the way I looked.
Yeah.
Because
you went from the Cube to the Cathedral, literally.
Exactly. So I ran in the other direction.
Yeah.
And I thank my lucky stars. I didn't realize how weird I was until I was much older.
Right.
But I feel like there were the better angels were looking out for me.
And to your point about the Cube and the Cathedral, and Mac, to your point about the meaning crisis, my sense is that monsters hover around all meaning crises, right? And the various manifestations of the different monsters sort of perhaps manifest different aspects of the particular thing, right? And all meaning crises sort of circulate around I think the ultimate anti-siren song, or the ultimate siren song, which is nihilism. Right. And sort of hovering around this whole thing is, and I think you see this in the Dracula myth. I think you see this in the pornography, is does my body mean? In other words, does what I do with my body matter? Does my body matter? Is my body mattering? Right. You can sort of play with this whole thing, but you get that sense, right? And so that, and everybody, wants to mean. Right. And even you look at what is his name? Renfield, I think, is Dracula's sort of lackey helper.
Right.
He's like devoted to, the Dark Lord in essence. Right. And so he's sort of trying to fill his own, sort of nihilism with some kind of meaning. But I'm struck by you serve the Cube or you serve the Cathedral. Like they're really, I think you have to hammer that home in a variety of different ways, right? And it's like this, like either it matters, if you sort of, go up into your room and fire up the phone and find some videos and masturbate. Like, does that matter? right?
Right.
And for my whole life, right?
Great
So
point.
for my whole life, the important people, the fancy people, the people who are in charge of our institutions were like, that doesn't